In my last life, I shamelessly chased after Harley. The day I died from cancer, he and his love, Betty, had an unforgettable wedding. The moment I was reborn, I found myself back at the day I confessed to him. In front of everyone, I slammed my love letter down on Daniel's desk. Daniel opened his eyes from his nap and looked at the letter filled with hearts. I said, "For you, it's scratch paper." The classroom fell into dead silence. Daniel slowly looked up, revealing a face that was aggressively attractive. Sharp features and a high nose. His right ear had a silver earring. So flashy. I heard a few gasps around me. I wasn't sure if it was awe or fear. I remember him, Daniel. Rumor has it that if you picked any 3 school buildings, one of them was donated by his family. So not only is he known as Mr. Daniel, but some also call him, the patron. A guy next to us joked, "Wow, Mr. Daniel, girls are chasing you into class now?" Daniel chuckled lazily and told him to shut up. His voice was lazy yet captivating. After he cursed, he turned to me, "What do you want?" I casually replied, "I want to sit next to you, is that okay?" Another set of gasps erupted nearby. This time, I knew it was out of shock. Daniel leaned on his hand, with a half smirk. "I never let anyone sit beside me, what makes you think you can?" Our gazes locked, neither backing down. I gritted my teeth. No choice here. The elite class had only 2 seats left. Sitting next to Harley was a death sentence. I might as well be shameless. I plopped my bag down and sat beside him. Daniel frowned impatiently as if he might throw me out any second. "I already said." Before he could finish, I pressed down on his leg under the desk. His expression froze. I whispered so only we could hear. "Please let me sit next to you, otherwise, I'll have to sit with Harley. You don't know, but he's a creep. When no one's around, he crawls around the classroom and even steals girls' skirts to wear. I have no choice." It didn't matter. Harley couldn't hear me. Even if he could, he deserved it. I got more excited as I spoke. With every word, I pressed harder. As my grip tightened, Daniel's face grew darker. The smirk was gone, replaced with a scowl. Almost through gritted teeth, he said, "Fine." I was puzzled. Wasn't he full of himself before? Why did he suddenly give in? And what's with that under-the-bridge expression? Wait, isn't his thigh a bit slim? And softer than I expected. Are you still squeezing? Daniel finally snapped. I withdrew my hand quickly. That wasn't his thigh. After class division, Harley trapped me in the hallway. "What's going on with you and Daniel?" I didn't want any more drama, so I shot back. "None of your business." Harley probably didn't expect me to shut him down. He frowned instantly. He blocked my path with his arm. "Mia, Daniel's out of your league. How could you give him a love letter?" Hearing that and remembering the mess from my last life, I flared up. "Whether I pursue him or not is my business, not yours. Better him than those who keep others hanging, not accepting or rejecting them." True, if Harley hadn't given me false hope every time I wanted to give up, I wouldn't have liked him for so long. Harley's face turned sour. "Mia, what do you mean by that?" I crossed my arms and smirked. "I'm insulting you, can't you tell?" Harley's face darkened further. Just as he continued, I decided not to waste time. I spotted Daniel not far away and waved, "Mr. Daniel." With everyone watching, Harley had no choice but to lower his arm and let me pass. In my ear, he said, "Mia, I'm really disappointed in you." I smiled at Daniel as I said shortly, "Beat it." As I reached Daniel, I smelled a faint hint of tobacco. "You just smoked?" Daniel nodded slightly, pushing me back with his hand on my forehead. His voice was husky and rough. "Secondhand smoke's bad for you, don't breathe it in." I recalled he only spent 3 months at school last time, rumor was health issues. Instinctively, I said, Even first-hand smoke is bad, could you not smoke? I looked up at him with a hopeful gaze. His sidekick broke the tension with a teasing remark. Not even dating Mr. Daniel yet and already trying to control him? It was then I realized how over the line my request was. Daniel doesn't know his past life. To him, I'm just a girl he met today telling him to quit smoking. That's really weird. I mean, maybe smoke less in the future. Two voices overlapped as I paused. Huh? Daniel pressed his right fist to his lips, coughing lightly. I'll quit altogether. Now it was my turn to be stunned. The legendary Daniel, is this agreeable? Harley's dream girl was Betty. In my past life, she joined the elite class with me. Not knowing Harley liked her, I happily sat next to him. I didn't know he'd saved that spot for her. No wonder Harley grew to dislike me and maliciously remarked when he received my letter. Oh, scratch paper? Back then, Betty didn't dare sit by Daniel and requested a seat by the podium. That left the lovebirds separated by half the class. Harley probably blamed me for it. Strangely, in this life, Betty got her seat next to him, but he seemed less interested. Instead, he kept cornering me. Is this what they mean by absence makes the heart grow fonder? To avoid Harley, I clung to Daniel. Short of following him into the men's room, of course. Though, practically speaking, I almost did. Whenever Daniel stood up, I immediately asked, bathroom? I'll go with you. Now every time I showed up at the men's room door, a group of his guys would tease. Oh wow, wife, here to accompany Mr. Daniel to the bathroom again? Can't be apart for a second, huh? With a wife like that, oh boy. Daniel would step out, slapping Max on the head, a lollipop dangling from his mouth, squinting as he said. What are you talking about, English class too easy for you? Since his promise to quit smoking, he hadn't touched a cigarette. Instead, he bought a load of lollipops from the corner store. When cravings hit, he'd pop one in his mouth. I happened to see, they were all strawberry flavored. He walked up to me with his hands in his pockets. Let's go, little tag along. I blushed. What kind of nickname is that? Don't call me that. Daniel leaned down with a chuckle. You don't know what everyone else at school calls us? They say you're my child bride, that's why you're always tagging along with me. What the heck is that about? I'm just trying to avoid Harley. I silently defended myself in my head, while Daniel pulled a lollipop from his pocket, unwrapped it, and opened his mouth in an ah shape. I looked at him suspiciously but opened my mouth anyway. The sweet taste spread through my mouth quickly. It was strawberry flavored. Why'd he suddenly give me candy? Before I could finish asking, Daniel was already walking toward the classroom, slowly. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Harley's figure flash by, and I quickly ran after Daniel. Hey! Wait for me. That day, Harley blocked me at the staircase again. I pretended not to see and tried to walk past him. But Harley blocked my path with a stack of notebooks. I said impatiently, move it. Harley frowned and said softly, these are my notes on the key points, the monthly exam is coming soon, you can't do without them. I didn't reach out to take them. Instead, I looked up suddenly, casting a mocking glance at him. Every time there was a class reshuffle, a monthly exam would follow. It was to see if new classmates could keep up with the class pace, and to weed out those who just got lucky. In the past life, I begged Harley to help me with the key points, but he refused. He said, you just got lucky getting into the elite class, you'll have to leave eventually, why stubbornly stick around? He always thought I was the lucky one, not believing I really liked him so much that I'd study like crazy. Later, I managed to stay in the elite class, ranking 5th from the bottom. Everyone was surprised, assuming Harley tutored me. But he never explained a word back then. And now, I avoid him like the plague. Yet, here he is, willingly handing over neatly organized notes. I crossed my arms and said with a smile, it's not for you to decide if I can do it or not. On the surface, you act as if you're doing me a favor, but in reality, all you do is belittle me. Harley, who gave you the guts to look down on me? Harley's expression stiffened, then he sighed, stop putting on a brave face. What matters now is you gotta improve your grades. I rolled my eyes, don't you understand words? I said I don't need it. Harley reached out, intending to forcefully shove the notebooks into my arms. In trying to avoid him, I naturally leaned back. But I forgot I was standing on the stairs. The feeling of weightlessness hit, and I instinctively screamed. But the expected pain didn't come. Instead, I landed in a strawberry-scented embrace. Ugh, how long are you gonna stay there? I looked at Daniel's face, dumbfounded until he spoke, making me realize I'd knocked him over. Sorry. Daniel got up, cracked his neck, and said to Harley, aren't you gonna leave already? Harley's face turned completely dark. He left without a word. In the end, he didn't dare confront Daniel head-on. After he was gone, Daniel stood there in silence. I felt guilty and quickly said, how about we head back to class? Daniel kept his head down, not moving, not speaking. I thought he was mad, so I hurriedly continued, he really cornered me. Ever since you told me to avoid him, I have been. I know. Daniel interrupted, looking up without a trace of anger. He pointed to his leg, can you help me to the nurse's office? Seems like I twisted my ankle. I struggled to help Daniel, watching as he hopped down the steps. Really avoided him because I told you to? Am I that important to you? Say one more word, and I'll push you down the stairs. Daniel twisted his ankle because of me. So naturally, taking care of him fell on my shoulders. Got him water. Got him food. Excused him from gym class. And at his insistence, I excused myself, too. To keep him company in class. During a break, Max looked at the heap of snacks and fruit on Daniel's desk, admiring, nice, wish I'd sprained something too. Daniel smugly glanced at him, does your desk partner treat you as well as mine does? Max's male desk partner, having been mentioned out of nowhere, slowly raised his head. But Mr. Daniel, Max continued, what will you do when you go home? No one's there to look after you. Caught by Daniel's dangerous look, Max swallowed the rest of his words. It suddenly reminded me of the rumors about Daniel from the past. They say that despite having a good family background, Daniel's parents rarely showed concern for him. They often made him transfer schools due to work, leaving him a bunch of money and nothing else. While some classmates privately said things like, I'd be fine with my parents ignoring me if I had that much money, I thought Daniel might still feel hurt. Thinking about it, I almost instinctively said, I'll go take care of you at your place. Upon hearing this, both Daniel and Max were stunned. Max scratched his head, saying, that's kind of you, but Mr. Daniel never lets anyone to his home. Okay. Daniel interrupted him. I turned to see Daniel smiling at me, promise you won't go back on your word. Daniel's home was on the top floor of a building downtown. I'd only heard before about the high rent, usually occupied by startups. Never thought there'd be actual residences there. As I carried the groceries I just bought, Daniel casually pointed toward the kitchen, put them there. I glanced around, searching for an apron. Turning my head, I found Daniel already wearing one. A roguishly handsome face paired with a pink frilly apron, he looked kind of cute. I was astonished, wasn't I supposed to cook? Daniel had already turned on the tap to wash the vegetables. He was balancing on the leg in a cast, leaning against the sink, frowning a bit, as if he was dueling with something. Oh, with the cabbage. During a pause, he unwrapped a lollipop and stuck it in his mouth, mumbling, just kidding, I wouldn't really make you. Let me show you my cooking skills today. I watched him expertly turn on the stove, slice the meat, cut the vegetables. My surprise kept growing. Guess my expression was obvious, as Daniel chuckled quietly, what? Thought I was a pampered rich kid? I very honestly nodded. The meat sizzled in the oil, crackling loudly. Daniel said, you know my family's loaded, right? They even call me some kind of millionaire. My parents are pretty generous, but if I ever fight with them, they cut me off completely. They even tell all our relatives and friends not to lend me any money. There was this one time we fought really bad, and they ignored me for 6 months. I couldn't even order takeout. It was the kind neighbor lady who felt sorry for me and gave me some vegetables. Even though I ended up burning them, not getting to eat, I learned to cook after that. He turned back and smiled at me. So during that time, every time I walked past the buildings they donated to our school, it made me so mad. I would have sold them to get something to eat. His expression was calm, without any pain or anger. But I could tell he wasn't happy. Even the last joke he made was just to lighten the mood. I opened my mouth, but I didn't know how to comfort him. I mean, whose family doesn't have some unspeakable stuff going on, right? Just as I was about to speak, my phone rang. Seeing who it was, I instinctively frowned. After hesitating, I picked up. Where are you? Why aren't you home yet? Your brother wants dessert from Pan's. Get some on your way back. Why aren't you talking? Cat got your tongue. I took a deep breath and hung up. Daniel looked at me, puzzled. Who was that? My dad. Oh. Silence hung in the air for a few seconds. No one wanted to continue the topic. You think you can still come back home? I opened the door to find the living room completely dark. As I fumbled for the light, I saw 3 figures sitting on the sofa. The man's anger filled the narrow space, mingling with the cheap cigarette smell. I looked at them calmly, not intending to argue. Yeah, I'm back, I said, heading straight for my room. Stop right there. My indifference only made him angrier. A glass whizzed past my ear, smashing against the wall, and shattered into pieces. The glass shards reflected my current expression like a kaleidoscope, numb and tired. Then I heard my mother's voice. Mia, what's gotten into you? Coming home so late every day. No one's cooking. Have you been hanging out with some sketchy people? Your dad's just worried. Come here and apologize to him. I turned and looked at the 3 of them. In a past life, I might have been fooled by my mom's gentle urging, and apologized without a second thought. But living again, I noticed the real point in her words. So is it really about me not cooking for the family? It's laughable, just like when I got my cancer diagnosis and called them, scared and unsure. Their first reaction was, since you don't know how long you have left, why not give your brother your bank password? Later, I donated all my assets to charity. They went crazy, even tried dragging me out of the hospital bed to change my will. You'd rather give to strangers than us? Your brother's getting married. We need the money. How could you give it away? No one seemed to care about my life ticking away. Maybe I realized then, they never loved me. Lacking love from my original family, I tried finding it in Harley. But I didn't know what love looked like, so I loved in a messy, painful way. That cycle of misery defined my past life. But this time around, I clenched my fists. Cat got your tongue again? That dessert I asked for? Bet you were off with some guy, huh? How could you forget? I grabbed a cup beside me and threw it straight at him. Fair's fair, a hit for a hit. You better watch your mouth. Seeing me actually stand up to their precious son, the other 2 got a little restless. Mia. You brat. Think I'll let you get away with this? Watch how I teach you a lesson today. Dad rolled up his sleeves, reaching out to grab me. The cup hadn't hit Ken's face, but it startled him. He stood there cussing. I heard enough. She's always chasing some guy, that Harley. No time for school. Am I wrong? Isn't he just some loser? She dares hit me over him. Great, I somehow raised a daughter with no shame. Look at her. It was chaos. Before Dad could grab me, I dodged into my room and slammed the door shut. The bang was my head knocking into the wooden door. Ow, Mia. Open up. If you've got guts, stay in there forever. Let's see how tough you are. I locked the door, ignoring the outside banging. After about 10 minutes, the pounding grew louder, even the sound of a hammer hitting the doorknob. If this keeps up, they'll break through in another 5 minutes. You want to come out yourself or have us break down the door? I'll count to 3, 2. I walked over and opened the door. Smart choice, you. Dad probably thought I'd opened up out of fear. After all, in this house, a countdown meant a beating was imminent. So my calm gaze surprised him so much he froze. Dragging my suitcase, I walked past them without expression. My mom shouted, "Mia, where are you going?" Ken snickered, playing the runaway game. You think anyone in this house cares? In the past, maybe those venomous words would have hurt me, but not now. I turned to them and said, "The suitcase and everything in it, I bought myself with my part-time job money. I've worked my way through school and gave all my leftover earnings to you. I don't think I owe you anything, but if the court ever rules I have to support you, I'll pay what's required. Till then, I hope we stay out of each other's lives." It's disgusting. I dragged the small suitcase out the door. Funny enough, in over a decade in this house, it wasn't until I left I realized every piece of clothing I'd worked for. And all I had were 5 outfits. My words seemed to leave them speechless. After walking a bit, I started to hear some conversations behind me. Mia, what are you saying? You're really going to leave? Are you really this heartless, not caring about your parents anymore? Why are you stopping her? I've been saying this all along, daughters are ungrateful. Spare me the nonsense about being a parent's little darling. Let her go then, Mom. Let's see how long she can last without anywhere to go. She'll eventually come back, head hanging. I held my suitcase and chuckled a little. We'll see how long. Let's just watch together. The street in the community was really dark, with dim streetlights stretching my shadow long. I stared at my shadow, a sudden sense of confusion washing over me. Admitting that your parents don't love you is truly tough. Even when you know it's not your fault, you still can't help but wonder. Is it because I'm not good enough that they love my brother more? No. I sharply looked up. A guy in a gray hoodie was leaning against the peeling street lamp pole. His face was hazy with cigarette smoke, but his eyes were unusually bright. I stammered a bit, Why are you here? When I left your house after dinner, you were about to sleep, weren't you? Daniel walked over, pulling me into a hug all of a sudden. His shoulders were broad, and his embrace was warm. Leaning against his chest, I listened to him speak, serious and earnest. It's not your fault, Mia. You're amazing. It's them who are wrong. Turns out the words I subconsciously uttered earlier, he heard them. I asked him, still sounding muffled, really? Daniel rested his chin on my head and nodded seriously. Really, Mr. Daniel never lies. I felt a little sting in my nose. I wanted to say, Daniel, did you know? This is the first time someone has chosen me so firmly. In the past, my love and my family all decisively abandoned me. I also wanted to say, Daniel, your sweet talk is really cheesy, but thank you. I appreciate it. But as the words formed, they turned into, Daniel, didn't you promise me you wouldn't smoke? That warm hug suddenly stiffened. The guy who just seemed strong enough to bear it all suddenly returned to being that awkward high schooler again. He spoke softly, When I saw the expression on your face while you were on the phone today, I guessed there was trouble. I followed you quietly and then heard the argument from your house. I got restless and just. His voice turned as quiet as a whisper, I won't do it next time. I looked up into his guilty, flickering eyes and suddenly laughed. Honestly, he didn't have to promise me anything. A casual remark of mine couldn't really bind him. Yet Daniel held on to that promise with great seriousness. Being valued feels like this. Even if you have nothing, there's someone willing to hand you a lifeline. Daniel's face was starting to heat up from my gaze. He touched his nose, then changed the subject. So, What are you planning to do now? Wanna crash at my place for a while? Sure. I agreed quickly. In fact, the moment I walked out that door, I was already thinking about what to do next. Currently, I'm a high school student with no income, no time for a part-time job. Living expenses, and food, that can be managed since eating at the cafeteria every day doesn't cost much. But accommodation, that's a major expense. In this city, a decent apartment costs thousands a month in rent, which I can't afford with my current situation. Having Daniel to help out with this pressing issue couldn't be better. But, I continued, I won't freeload. Once I have some money, I'll pay you rent, okay? Daniel was visibly pleased I agreed so readily. When I mentioned paying rent, he frowned, if only briefly, before nodding in agreement with my decision. I smiled at him with gratitude, thankful he respected my pride. But how are you going to earn money? Daniel asked. I flashed him a mysterious smile, saying, I have my ways. Actually, it isn't much of a secret. High school number 13 is the best in the city, receiving numerous investments and donations each year. The school uses these funds to create many awards to encourage top students. The sums are substantial, and the awards diverse. The biggest prize is during the midterm exams. First place in the grade gets $10,000, second place $5,000, third $2,500, and so on. Additionally, there's the Best Improvement Award with a $5,000 prize. Unfortunately, these competitions are dominated by the elite class every year, and that $10,000 generally goes straight into Harley's pocket. I think this time, maybe the top spot should be mine for a change. This is the only way I can think of to earn quick money at the moment. I didn't tell Daniel about my plan. Firstly, to avoid the humiliation if I failed. Secondly, if Daniel knew I wanted to beat Harley, he might bother him daily, keeping him from studying. Not that I'm worried about Harley. It's just that this kid likes playing dirty. Daniel is too kind-hearted and straightforward to deal with him. There are 2 months left until the midterms. In these 2 months, I've put in 10 times the effort than I did for my entrance exams in my past life. These kids who've never stepped out of the ivory tower won't understand how much potential a corporate survivor returning to school can unleash. Even Daniel couldn't help but ask, we're living under the same roof, but how come it feels like I hardly see you? I just smiled, taking it as a compliment. For the last monthly exam before midterms, I kept my scores in check. Standing out draws attention, and I wasn't ready for that yet. I also didn't want to get carried away because of improved scores. So, I kept my rank among the lower few of the class, close to my usual scores, while ensuring I stayed in the elite class. However, when I was taking the test and realized I could do all the problems, my heart started pounding with excitement. An undeniable anticipation arose within me. The kind an already prepared general has for the battlefield. After the results came, Harley was helping hand out the papers. When he reached my desk, his expression was pitying, but his eyes glittered with glee. He sighed and said, I told you not to be so stubborn. You almost didn't make it in the elite class. I've kept notes for you, if you need them. Harley, I suddenly called out. He probably didn't expect me to use such a gentle tone with him. He was momentarily stunned, his face slightly red. Yeah? Without even raising my head, I replied calmly, why don't you go adopt a kid from an orphanage? Harley was baffled, what? I think you'd make a great dad, always telling people what to do. Harley's face turned completely dark, and it took several deep breaths for him to recover and say, Mia, don't be ungrateful. Let's see how you handle the midterm. He wanted to say more, but his peripheral vision caught Daniel entering the classroom. He glanced at me a few times, then clenched his teeth and walked away. Daniel watched Harley's back as he sat down, frowning. Was he bothering you again? I shook my head, waving the test paper. Daniel chuckled and snatched the test paper from my hand, saying with a grin, you did pretty well, huh? He never had to worry about which class he'd end up in. With those few buildings his family donated to the school, even if he scored at the bottom, the the principal would still make sure he stayed in the elite class. But if I could help boost his scores a bit, maybe his parents wouldn't pressure him to transfer schools. So I asked, "Where's your test paper?" Daniel paused, then said confidently, "I didn't take the test. I was out playing basketball." Since seating is usually random, I didn't know he skipped the exam. I was stunned. "Why?" Daniel shrugged, didn't feel like it, wasn't interested. I went silent. Well, looks like getting his scores up is going to be a long-term project. Time quickly flew by and it was already midterms. Even though seats were randomly assigned, the teacher made sure to put all the elite class students in the same room to prevent regular class students from cheating. So, by chance, I ended up sitting with Harley and Betty on either side of me. Just my luck. But once the bell rang, I had to focus. Unlike the last monthly exam, I gave it my all this time. In my last life, I always thought studying was tough. After getting into the elite class, I started slacking off. If it wasn't for wanting to stay close to Harley, I'd probably have been kicked out as soon as I got in. But living this life again, I realized studying isn't as hard as life itself. If I don't study well, I might end up making the same mistakes again. I might get caught up with sketchy guys and let my family control me. With that thought in mind, I've been putting in the hours for the past 2 months. What used to be brain-busting problems now seemed like child's play. So much so that I finished half an hour before the exam ended. I went over my answers again. That's when Harley put down his pen and gave me a suspicious look. When the bell rang and the proctor collected the papers, everyone rushed towards the door. Harley squeezed in next to me, frowning. "The exam was tough, but you can't just give up like that." I raised an eyebrow. Tough? Didn't seem that way to me. Harley's frown deepened, and he oozed that top student smugness. "Maybe you didn't feel it, but those last questions were pretty tricky. The score gap's probably gonna widen again." I rolled my eyes and brushed past him, leaving the classroom. All that confidence, even listening to it for one more second, was going to give me brain rot. The next few exams went the same way. I always finished half an hour earlier than Harley. When the last exam wrapped up, Harley sighed repeatedly at me. "I'll talk to the teacher, maybe they'll let you stay in the elite class." "How about that?" I laughed. What an odd guy. Last time around, would he have thought to help me? No way. Because no matter which class I was in, I'd always stick to him like glue. And now that I've moved on, he clings on, refusing to let go despite my ridicule. But is he really trying to help me? Nah. He's just upset, wanting to reclaim that pedestal where everyone admires him. I turned to Harley with a dismissive smile. "No need. I don't deserve that." Midterms always have rankings released. They post the school rankings on a bulletin board in the hallway. Since these exams are super important, the teachers graded them in just 3 days. On the day they posted the results, I was grabbing a drink at the vending machine and noticed a crowd buzzing around the board. No way, Harley messed up this time. What's up with the elite class? Is everything changing? Stop it. She's coming over. Standing on my tiptoes outside the crowd, a girl in front turned around and shot me a startled look. At someone's shout, everyone turned, mirroring her shocked expression. Amid the rustling of clothes shifting, a path cleared for me. Was it really that dramatic? It felt rude not to walk through. With all eyes on me, I made my way to the board and opened my eyes wide. There it was, in big bold letters, first place, Mia. Did I really beat Harley? But what shocked me the most wasn't just that. It was that Harley wasn't even second place. It was Daniel. Second place, Daniel. Third place, Harley. The former undefeated top student was now in third. No wonder it attracted so much attention. Especially with who beat him, a daydreamer who transferred for her crush and a school bad boy whose family bought his way in. Move out the way. A familiar voice rang out, and I turned to see Harley's gloomy face. I glanced back at the board, finding the whole situation a bit funny. He wasn't wrong saying the score gap widened. Because he was 10 points behind Daniel and a full 20 behind me. Suddenly, my wrist stung, pulling me back to reality. Harley had stormed over, gripping me tightly, seething, "Is this fun for you?" I was puzzled. "If you mean coming first, then yeah, it's a blast knocking you down a peg." More curious onlookers gathered, almost blocking the whole hallway. Then, Harley blurted out loud enough for everyone to hear, "Cheating has limits. You think a stolen score is worth something?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. The chatter quickly rose among them. "I knew it, there's no way she's number one, right? Guess Harley saw her cheat since they were sitting together during the exam." "Exactly. She cheats, Harley caught her, and she shamelessly took first, no wonder he's mad." Listening to their accusations, I snickered. Wow, they even made up a whole story for me. "You got any proof?" Harley grimaced, gritting his teeth. "Mia, you can fool others but not me. 2 months isn't enough to improve this much." "Who fed you the answers? Was it Daniel? Is that why he's second?" More shocked gasps came from the crowd. The murmurs only grew louder. "That explains how they both ended up first and second, right?" "Yeah, for sure. Daniel's family is loaded. It's totally possible he paid off the teacher. He probably bought the answers and handed them over to Mia. They're even desk mates. How could both of them improve so much at the same time without something fishy going on?" "I've figured out how rumors start now." I shook off Harley's hand and, crossing my arms, chuckled. "Can't handle the sudden drop, can you? Harley, you'd better get used to it because from now on, I'll be beating you in every exam. Better learn to say goodbye to that top spot." As I was about to leave, Harley shouted at me from behind, "You still won't admit it, will you?" I laughed in disbelief. "Don't just talk, man. If you think I cheated, where's the proof?" The crowd was silent for a few seconds, all eyes on Harley. His face was dark, but then he seemed to make up his mind and yelled, "I saw it, Mia, I saw you cheating with my own eyes. I've got to say, Harley's being pretty dumb here." "What, he couldn't come up with something like I memorized the answers? Cheating with crib notes? That's something security footage could easily catch." Then, the class teacher said with an awkward look, "The camera in the exam room, it's broken." I could tell from the way he avoided eye contact that he was trying to protect Harley. Harley's been the top student for so long, he'd still be the teacher's pet even if he didn't ace this one. The teacher would rather lie than let people know Harley was throwing a tantrum and making things up. But, why should I take the blame for Harley's mess up? Without evidence, but with a witness, doesn't it all just confirm my cheating? A lazy voice came from outside the office. "A little camera like that breaks so easily. Makes me wonder where my dad's investment went, if the school board is pocketing it. Makes me wonder if this school is even worth building another building on." I turned around, surprised and excited to see Daniel emerge from a crowd of gossiping students, hands in his pockets. The teacher's forehead was visibly sweating. He stuttered, "Why are you here?" Daniel pouted, "Isn't someone saying I cheated for my second place? I'm here to see who it is that doesn't want to live." The teacher wiped his forehead with his sleeve awkwardly and said, "No, not you. This is about Mia." "Oh." Daniel laughed, "If you say she cheated, where'd she get the answers from? The exam questions come from top provincial teachers, how could she have gotten to them? It'd only make sense if she got them from me, right?" The teacher was silent. Daniel had a point. I had no connections or money to get answers from the exam makers. So now, the big rumor is Daniel bribed the teacher and shared the answers with me. But making me take the blame and making Daniel take the blame are two different things. I knew Daniel was so determined to link us together to use his family's influence against the school. For that, I gave him a grateful look. The teacher's expression turned even more uncomfortable. Seeing he couldn't further trouble us, he turned to Harley. "Harley, did you really see Mia cheat? Maybe you were mistaken, it could be a misunderstanding." His tone was coaxing, like he was hinting at something. But things had snowballed to this point. There was no way Harley was backing down. He gritted his teeth, insisting, I saw it with my own eyes. The teacher stayed silent, glancing between both groups, unsure what to do. He already said the camera was broken. If he changed his story, his attempt to cover for Harley would be out in the open. He couldn't lose his authority as a teacher. Harley knew this, which is why he held on so tightly. While things were at a standstill, a clear female voice came from the door, I can testify. Betty walked into the office, and my heart sank. How could I forget about her? She was sitting right next to me and Harley during the exam. If she decided to back up Harley's story, then I'd be done for. Daniel seemed to sense my concern, giving my pinky a discreet squeeze, don't worry. Somehow, his words calmed me down. Meanwhile, Harley's eyes sparkled with confidence, as if he was sure Betty would take his side. The teacher asked, Betty, what are you here to testify about? Betty glanced at Harley and then at me. Finally, she took a deep breath as if mustering the courage and said, I can testify that Mia didn't cheat. I was stunned. Harley was too, but he recovered first, rushing to grab Betty's sleeve, yelling, what are you saying? Daniel's eyes flashed, and he grabbed Harley by the collar, forcing him to back off. The scene got a little chaotic, the teacher's voice ringing out like a mediator, hey, no fighting. Betty seemed shaken, pale-faced, but she stood firm next to me and said, I was right next to Mia during the test. She solved the questions quickly, and I was surprised too. So I watched her closely. I can swear she never pulled out any paper or cheated during the exam. After she finished, silence filled the office. From outside came a sudden burst of murmurs from the eavesdropping students. Harley kept trying to argue feebly, they're all in on it. The teacher rubbed his temples, clearly struggling, and told us, you three can leave now. Harley, you stay. Outside, I turned to Betty and said, thank you. Betty looked away, a bit embarrassed but still firm in her tone, no need to thank me. I just told the truth, and now I realize Harley's not worth my time. Then, she paused, glancing at me, I still don't like you. With that, she held her head high and walked away. Watching her leave, I smiled wryly. Maybe now I understood why Harley was so into her before. Daniel waved a hand in front of my face, what are you looking at? Snapping out of it, I shook my head, nothing, I just think she's braver than me. The school's decision for Harley was a public reprimand and a mark on his record. Accusing someone falsely would be a stain on his life. I know, the school making such a big move means Daniel probably had a hand in it. But after the Harley incident was over, I started questioning Daniel. Arms crossed, squinting my eyes, I asked, you could be second in the whole school, so why did you act like your grades were bad before? Daniel shrugged, like I said, it's boring. Didn't want to try. So the tests were too easy, huh? Daniel continued, after you asked me about my grades last time, I wanted to surprise you, make you admire me a bit. Didn't think I'd still not beat you, Mia. I chuckled, sorry about that. I guess it's your turn to admire me. Daniel looked at me, eyes sparkling, I've always admired you, Mia. I'm not sure if the whole thing with Harley was too much for him. He stopped bothering me, but he didn't really get into studying either. His grades dropped, eventually falling out of the top 10. A golden boy who's never faced setbacks can really fall apart after a failure. Oh well, maybe in this life he's making up for whatever wrongs he did in the last one. I got my rightful 10,000 yuan prize, used half of it to pay Daniel for rent. He took it without hesitation and even got me a tutoring gig. 4 hours a week, earning 100 yuan an hour, which is enough for my weekly expenses. I didn't hesitate to accept his kindness. Life just went on smoothly like that. I never slacked in my studies, so my grades stayed solid. Daniel skipped exams occasionally, but no one said he was bribing his way into the elite class anymore. Not sure what deal he made with his parents, but he stayed at our school this lifetime. When we got to senior year, Daniel finally started taking his studies seriously. He was naturally smart, plus having access to the best teachers from childhood certainly helped. So he held firmly onto that number 2 spot. Of course, I was number 1. Each time I ranked first, people would bring up what Harley did to me again, and he'd face ridicule. My statement, "I'll beat you in every exam," became an inescapable nightmare for him. Maybe he got sick of the gossip, because a month before college entrance exams, Harley chose to study at home. Betty? This time around, she saw through Harley early and pulled back her feelings. I ran into them a few times in the hallway. Harley always looked like he wanted to say something. Betty just walked right past him, not even fazed. So you see, Harley, what goes around comes around. Those who let down sincere hearts don't swallow 1,000 needles, but they do face their karma. When the acceptance letters came, Daniel and I both got into the same school. No melodramatic sacrifices for one another. We were both excellent and got into the top university in the province. As for Harley, I heard he didn't do well on the entrance exams and ended up at some university I've never heard of. Betty was sent abroad by her family. In the last life, she also went abroad to cut ties with Harley. If this were a fairy tale, it would end here. The good guys get rewarded, and the bad guys get punished. But fairy tale princesses don't have leeching birth families, so my story keeps going. In college, Daniel and I got together. My parents, somehow hearing I was seeing a rich guy, rushed to my school one night. When my advisor called me to her office, I was confused. As soon as I walked in, my mom lunged and wrapped me in a messy, tearful hug. "Mia, you're so heartless, abandoning your parents like this. You haven't come home in years, we've been worried sick." Once I processed what was happening, I laughed bitterly. Looking for me? I ran away from home, stood just 20 meters from the door and ran into Daniel. I waited half an hour and you never came looking. Why the act now? The advisor, unaware of the truth, thought I was a rebellious runaway, her expression pretty serious. She said, "Mia, you should communicate with your parents. Look at them, coming all this way to find you, it wasn't easy." I smiled politely, a bit apologetic. "Sorry, Professor, I didn't think it through and caused trouble. I'll get my parents settled. Goodbye." Seeing I was sincere, the advisor didn't push it further and just waved us off with, "All right, take 2 days off to spend with your parents." I nodded repeatedly and ushered my parents out. Only once we were out did their faces start to register surprise. They'd planned to make a scene in front of the advisor, giving me a hard time. Then threatened me for money, saying things like "make you famous throughout the school." I've known them for over 2 decades, and I can read them like a book. They didn't expect I'd handle the situation calmly and brush off the teacher with a few words. The office door shut, my mom snapped back to reality, trying to push past me to grab the handle again. "We need to clarify this in front of the teacher." I held her hand firmly, smiling with zero mirth. "If you go in there, not a dime from me." My dad stepped up, sharply smacking my hand away. "You ungrateful child. Treating us like this." Ignoring the sting on my hand, I met his gaze, cold and unyielding. "You can go and escalate things, but look closely, I'm not the naive little girl you could boss around anymore. While I'm still speaking decently, come with me." Even executioners age. When they do, their axe barely stays sharp. I was having none of it. With silent defiance, we stared each other down. Eventually, the executioner yielded. My dad whispered to my mom, "Let's go, we'll talk outside." At a cafe near the school entrance, they sat with crocodile tears. My mom began, "Your brother took money from us saying he's going to school but never went. Turns out he gambled it away instead. 30,000 yuan. He spent it all in a month and came back with a ton of debt. We paid it off the first time, and he knelt down and promised never to do it again. But a month later, creditors came knocking, and it was 100,000, Mia. Your dad and I took out our last savings, money that was supposed to be for your brother's wedding." Here, she was almost sobbing. I didn't know if she was heartbroken for her son or the daughter-in-law who hadn't even walked into the disaster yet. If it weren't absolutely necessary, your dad and I wouldn't have come to you. We're really out of options. I frowned slightly, asking, did you sell the house or the car? The crying stopped abruptly. Both of them looked at me in shock. I continued calmly, looks like you didn't. Is that what you call out of options? My dad seemed pricked in his conscience and burst into anger in his extreme guilt. You, what do you mean? Do you want your mom and me on the streets before we come to you? Do I have to kneel? Go ahead, I interrupted him. Clearly, if you mean it, then kneel. Anyone can talk, who's using moral high ground here? Fine, you're really something, he said, his face turning all sorts of colors before sitting down with a dark face. I got comfortable in my seat, laughing softly. You keep asking me for help, but I'm just a college student. Where do I get money? The couple exchanged a glance, and the room grew awkwardly silent. After a moment, my mom forced a laugh and said, Mia, don't hide it from us. We heard you're dating the heir of a group, right? Of course. I smiled coldly. We're just dating. Why would I ask him for money? My mom sensed a chance and eagerly pushed on. Why can't you ask him for money? It's just 100,000, a small amount for him. And this is your brother. My dad, who had been silent, snorted and proudly said from a position of authority. Besides, if he wants to marry you, the dowry would be more than 100,000 anyway. What's wrong with getting it early? He's already slept with my daughter. Shut up. I slammed the table, losing control for the first time today. Even though I was prepared, I couldn't believe such words came from my own father. To him, a daughter is merely a bargaining chip for wealth. A tool to save his son. Not a living, breathing person with dignity. Seeing me angry, his voice softened but was still dissatisfied. What are you shouting for? I'm just saying. I massaged my forehead. I don't have money, and I won't ask Daniel. But since you came all this way, you can stay in my apartment for 2 days while thinking about my brother's situation. Hearing the first part, they wanted to argue more. But after the last part, my mom tugged at my dad's sleeve, shaking her head. Watching their small signals made me smile inside. If you hadn't come to find me today, us going separate ways, having nothing to do with each other, would have been a good thing. But I know you won't let go of this cash cow. So, no matter what happens, don't blame me. Because sometimes, my tutoring sessions run late, and I often miss curfew. Which is why I rented an apartment off campus. As soon as my mom walked in, she began to comment jealously. Your brother's living a life of hiding back home, yet you're enjoying yourself here. I didn't indulge her and retorted. Did I force him to gamble? Was I hiding him? Sometimes, people are like that. If you listen obediently, they'll push further. But if you show anger, they clam right up. After that remark, my mom immediately shut her mouth. My dad lay back on the sofa, crossing his legs, as he looked at a photo of Daniel and me on the coffee table, saying, Never thought I'd become a relative of a group. When are you bringing him around for us to meet? In my mind, I mocked, never happening. But out loud, I said, maybe when there's time. Just then, my mom, who was snooping around, pointed at a safe. What's in here? I looked up, a bit panicked, nothing important. They exchanged a glance again, and my dad gave me a meaningful look. Growing up, keeping things from your parents, huh? I didn't respond. In the following days, I was busy with classes while my parents stayed in the apartment, eating and drinking. Occasionally they'd see me and demand I find money for my brother. One day, as I walked in, the table was covered with gift bags. My heart sank, a feeling of foreboding washed over me. My mom held a designer bag in her hand, smiling. Mia, look at this bag, isn't it beautiful? Daniel picked it out for me. The thread snapped in my head. I rushed over, grabbing her arm, gritting my teeth. Did you go see Daniel? She shrugged off my hand, nonchalant. Oh my, you wouldn't help your brother, so your dad and I had to ask your future husband for help. You have no idea, that building, that office, wow. I planned so long to handle my family's mess with my own power. But I never imagined they'd shamelessly find Daniel for money. I took a deep breath. Let's go return everything. What are you talking about? My dad quickly walked over, pulling my mom aside, looking down on me. You don't just return a gift from the younger generation to the elders. My blood boiled. If you don't, you can get out of my apartment today. Hearing this, my mom immediately sat on the ground, crying. It's so unfair. Raised you this big, never thought one day I'd be driven out by my own daughter. I was so mad my head began to spin. Couldn't imagine what kind of vile, lowly words they'd said to Daniel. More so, how Daniel viewed me now. Uncle, Aunt, what's going on? Suddenly, Daniel's voice appeared behind me. I quickly turned to face him with his amused, questioning gaze. It's nothing, it's nothing. My mom quickly got up, patting her clothes, forcing a laugh. We were just playing around with Mia. You're here, come in, come in. I looked down at his shoes, biting my lip. What a shame. I just feel an unprecedented embarrassment. I was so determined to handle things on my own. I really didn't want him to look down on me. Come on. A warm hand wrapped around my shoulder, guiding me towards the living room. No tears now, the real show hasn't even started yet. I looked up abruptly. What does that mean? In the safe in my apartment, I put $30,000. My plan was simple, let them notice the money and break in to steal it. I set up a camera meant for pets in the living room, hoping to catch them in the act. With the evidence in hand, I could threaten to call the police and force them out of my life. What I didn't expect was getting Daniel involved midway. My parents were in the kitchen, cutting fruit and wiping the table, trying hard to impress Daniel and secure him as their wealthy son-in-law. But Daniel was behind me, whispering in a voice only we could hear, You prepared so much, how did you manage to forget about me? I was surprised. You figured it out? Daniel raised an eyebrow. I guessed it since you bought that old, flimsy safe. Who'd pick one like that unless they wanted it to be broken into? And since you don't have pets, getting a camera was suspicious until your advisor told me your parents visited you. Then it all made sense. A weight lifted off my shoulders. Thankfully he figured it out and didn't judge me for it. More importantly, I wasn't carrying this burden alone anymore. But suddenly, I was curious. If you knew, why did you still bring them gifts? Daniel smiled mysteriously, holding me tighter. I know you're willing to do anything to get rid of them, but I didn't want you labeled as someone who reports their own parents. Leave it to me. I stared at his face, emotions swirling, gratitude, surprise, complexity. They all boiled down to one thing. All right, I trust you. These past few days, my parents acted as if the A Group's building was their own home. They went there every other day and always returned with tons of luxury gifts. They were even planning how to marry me to Daniel quickly to get a sizable dowry. I found it annoying, but I tolerated it because of Daniel's plan. Until one day, I noticed a USB drive on the living room's coffee table. It looked out of place among all the luxury items. What's this? I picked it up and examined it, asking. To my surprise, my mom immediately lunged forward and snatched it back, nervously saying, It's nothing. I bought it myself. I thought to myself, you don't even know how to start a computer, let alone need something stored on a USB drive. It must have been swiped from Daniel's office. I held back my emotions and texted Daniel about the USB. Daniel replied quickly, Yep. Now I understood. After all these days, the show was finally about to begin. The next day, Daniel's assistant, Larry, came to our door. Oh my, it's Larry. My mom started to greet him, but Larry, looking flustered, brushed past her. Mia, the boss sent me to ask if you've seen this. He showed me a picture on his phone, unmistakably the USB drive I saw yesterday. I caught a glimpse of my mom's face, and it had turned pale. I didn't answer, instead asked back, "Did something happen?" Larry wiped the sweat from his forehead and said, "This contains our company's trade secrets. It was always securely kept in the boss's office, but today, before a meeting, we couldn't find it. The boss sent me to check if it was left here." No sooner had he finished when my mom blurted out anxiously, "Is it very important?" "Of course, it's vital, ma'am. This could ruin a multi-billion project if our competitors get it," Larry replied. My mom's face turned stark white, and she was speechless. "I'll look for it and contact Daniel if I find it." "You should go back for now," I told Larry. After he left, I turned to ask my mom, "Was what you brought home yesterday exactly what Daniel lost?" She nodded, panicking. "Yes." "Where is it now?" I gave it to someone." "What did you say?" I almost shouted, intensifying my voice. Mom, clutching her chest, shot me an annoyed glance. "Why are you so loud?" "Yes, there's this young chap we met. He heard I'm Daniel's mother-in-law and asked if I could bring it out for him to see." I was on the verge of tears from her foolishness. Just because someone asks, you give it to them? Don't you realize that's stealing? "He paid $200,000. She retorted. "Your brother's issues aren't resolved yet." "Sure, Daniel has given gifts but never cash. I can't sell my bag to save your brother, can I? This money can pay off debts and buy your brother a car." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, swallowing the curse words at the tip of my tongue. "Of course, you can sell your bag, but you wanted cash without giving up luxury. All boiled down to vanity." At that point, my dad, drawn by the noise, emerged. He maintained his authority, instructing, "It's just some USB. Get it back. No big deal." I sighed in frustration. "Didn't you hear Larry? It contains trade secrets. Even if you get the USB back, what's inside is likely copied. Billions wiped out, do you know what that means? They'll find out you stole it, which means police, which means jail time." My mom collapsed onto the couch, muttering in disbelief, "This can't be so serious." Suddenly, she lunged at me. "Mia, you have to save your parents. Your brother's still in trouble. You have to plead with Daniel, please." I wore a helpless expression. For such a massive project, Daniel's word isn't enough. There's his dad, and the board above him. Holding her wrist, I said, "Mom, let's go to the police. Maybe we can get a lighter sentence." "No way." She shoved me aside. "You're crazy. No turning ourselves in." Glancing at Dad for support, "Old man, say something. We can't end up in jail." Unexpectedly, he, usually aggressive, calmed down, sighed, and said to me, "We messed up, yes. But we're too ashamed to face Daniel now. Why don't you see if you can bring him here, and we'll apologize face to face. After that, it's his call." As soon as my words were out, my mom's face turned into one of disbelief. "Are you crazy? You going to jail is one thing, but me? No way. At my age, I'd probably die in there. Why should I?" Slap. The sound of a sharp slap echoed. My dad pointed at my mom, who was knocked to the ground, and yelled, "We can't back out in front of our daughter. Let's treat it as the last lesson we teach her." Not wanting to watch this drama any longer, I turned and grabbed the door handle. "All right, I'll go get Daniel and bring him over." Returning home was 2 hours later. I ordered some takeout from Daniel's office and brewed a pot of tea. Finally, I leisurely took him home. When we opened the door, unsurprisingly, the place was deserted. They were in such a rush that they didn't even have time to open the safe, leaving $3,000 untouched for me. "You really know them well," predicting they'd run, I chuckled, with a hint of mockery and reflection. I bet from now on, they'll steer clear of me, not daring to cause any more trouble. What about the USB drive? I asked. Daniel shook his head. No worries. It's loaded with false info. If the Lius believe it, it'll only help us. I smiled, he pulling off a 2-for-1, impressive strategy. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Am I that admirable? On his still bold and carefree face, I saw a glimpse of the young boy I knew years ago. I said, always have, Daniel. Daniel's epilogue. Today, while checking up at the hospital, I ran into a hysterical couple. Medical disputes aren't uncommon, but then I saw the patient's name, Mia. It's not a common name, so I was almost sure it was her. On a whim, I had Larry look into it. He got back to me pretty quickly. So, she donated all the money and her parents disagree? Larry nodded. Exactly, boss. I fell into deep thought, memories of my high school days surfacing. Back then, my parents were busy with business, shuffling me from school to school. Sometimes for a few months, sometimes half a year. I never really made any friends. When I was studying in New York, I discovered a secret hideout. An abandoned factory. It became pitch black after dark. I actually liked that darkness. When I had nowhere to go after school and didn't want to go home, I'd sit there. One day, while zoning out in my usual spot, I heard footsteps. And then a girl's sobbing voice. I really don't have money, please let me go. In the moonlight, I vaguely saw a chubby guy say. No one just carries $5 these days. Stop faking it and hand it over. Another skinnier guy said nervously. Boss, it's really dark here, and there are rumors of ghosts. Maybe we should go find someone else to rob. The chubby guy yelled back, stop whining. The quicker we get the money, the sooner we can hit the internet cafe. Changing targets will waste time. Then he turned back and kept pressuring the girl for money. But she kept insisting. I really don't have any money. My parents don't give me any. The guy called boss got annoyed and said, no money, huh? Then what's that hanging on that red string around your neck? Is that a jade? Hand it over. The girl, summoning some courage, refused. No, it's from my grandma. Seeing she wouldn't give it up, the chubby guy tried to snatch it himself. They tugged back and forth in a chaotic scene. Normally, I wouldn't interfere with such things. But for some reason, maybe in a good mood that day, I decided to play hero. I picked up a rock from the ground and threw it at them. Ow! The rock missed the chubster but hit the skinny dude. He screamed, ghost. Ghost for real. The chubby guy, annoyed, paused and yelled, what are you screaming about? Boss, believe me, I got hit by a ghost. Feel my head, it's got a bump. Though he was still acting tough, I caught a bit of a tremble in his voice. Come on, there aren't really any ghosts in this world. Another rock hit him square on the forehead. I got hit too, by a ghost. Lucky for you today, we're outta here. Then the two bolted from the factory. Crossing my arms, I leisurely watched the girl who remained standing there, expecting her to freak out and run too. But she didn't. Instead, she opened her arms and groped her way towards me. Thank you, kind soul. I raised an eyebrow. Does she believe in materialism? As she was almost in front of me, I had to speak up. Stop. Sure enough, she obediently stopped. But she tripped on a stone before fully stopping and fell. She hadn't been in the factory long enough to adapt to its darkness, so she couldn't see a thing. Though she fell, she didn't get up, likely troubled by me telling her to stop. She just stayed there, neither advancing nor retreating. I sighed. How can someone be so clumsy? Sitting on the floor, she tried to peer into the darkness to catch a glimpse of me, but to no avail. She asked, kind soul, what's your name? Are you also from school 13? I didn't answer, just extended a hand. Get up. She didn't seem to see my hand, but misheard my words instead. Harley? The one from the elite class, Harley? Who? I opened my mouth but then decided against correcting her. Deep down, I didn't want to get too involved with anyone here since I'd eventually leave anyway. So I withdrew my hand and said nonchalantly, "I'm leaving." With that, I strode out. The girl called after me, "Harley, thank you. I'll find you." Later, I recognized her because she became well known as Harley's shadow, always tagging along behind him. Looking at that then, I was just relieved I never gave her my real name. Otherwise, I'd be annoyed. But later on, when I ate alone or walked alone, I'd often spot her hanging around Harley. And then I'd find myself wondering, what if I'd given her my name back then? Would she admire me the way she admired Harley? What does feeling admired even feel like? But I could only wonder. Yet I remembered her name. Mia. Eventually, as usual, I switched schools and left. Everything from the past faded from my memory. I never thought I'd see her again after all these years, or even remember her name. I rubbed my forehead and told Larry, "Get her the best equipment in the hospital, and put her in the best room, but don't let her notice. The medical bills can be the same as before." Larry looked troubled and said, "Boss, it's no use. She's all ready." I was a bit stunned. Then there was a long silence. Coming to my senses, I waved him off, "You can go now." A few months later, Mia passed away. She died in the hospital owned by my company. I saved her once, but couldn't do it a second time. It made me feel kinda sad. Not long after, I got an invitation. My assistant said, "It's from our competitors group. It's from a high school classmate, asking you to please attend." I didn't really remember them. Probably one of those small companies we worked with a few times. But, you know, I had a bunch of high school classmates. Who could remember them all? But when I opened the invitation, I went silent. Harley, Betty. Names I actually remembered. Seeing my reaction, Larry quickly added, "I heard Miss Betty studied abroad for a few years, and Mr. Harley's waited for her the whole time. She was touched by his dedication, rushed to marry him as soon as she got back. They already had a big, fancy wedding that the media called an epic wedding. This one's the second, inviting all the business big shots, trying to get Harley's company some traction." I raised an eyebrow, catching the key point. Harley's company? Larry continued, "Yes, they're investing in their son-in-law, gave him some money to start his own business. And, oh, we have an ongoing partnership with them right now." I said almost instantly, "Cancel it." Larry, who had been talking so confidently, was suddenly taken aback. "Huh?" I repeated, "Cancel our company's partnership with B Group, it doesn't matter how much it costs us. And make an announcement, anyone who does business with B Group can forget about working with a group." Larry was stunned and asked instinctively, "Why, boss?" Looking at the names on the invitation, I finally said, "Because he's a thief." After B Group went bankrupt, I went to visit Mia. Standing in front of her small gravestone, I didn't know what to say. I felt sorta guilty. Her life turned into a tragedy from the moment she fell for Harley. But the start of that tragedy was my doing. "Do you blame me?" I asked quietly. But there was no answer. Just the wind gently brushing past me like a sigh. I said, "Even though it's years too late, let me finally introduce myself. Hi, I'm Daniel.